The freezing rain came down in sheets that Tuesday afternoon, soaking right through my sensible wool coat. I stood on the wet concrete of the driveway, watching my belongings tumble out the front door. A floral blouse I loved landed in a puddle, followed by my comfortable shoes and a cheap vinyl suitcase. Standing in the doorway of that oversized, overly decorated suburban house was my daughter-in-law Chloe. Her face was twisted in a sneer, her arms crossed tightly over her expensive cashmere sweater. "I'm not caring for a broke mother-in-law," she screamed, her voice cutting through the sound of the pouring rain. "You are a burden, Yvonne. You bring absolutely nothing to this household but the smell of old age and outdated opinions. We are done subsidizing your life. Take your garbage and find a shelter." Any normal woman my age might have collapsed right there on the slippery pavement. I am 65 years old, a retired public school administrator. For a woman in her golden years to be thrown out into the street by her own family is a tragedy that would break most hearts. But as the icy rain dripped down my chin, I felt an undeniable heat rising in my chest. It was not anger. It was the warmth of a secret I had guarded for a very long time. I looked at Chloe. I looked at the grand house behind her. And then I did the last thing she expected. I smiled. I reached into my damp pocket, pulled out my phone, and dialed a private number I kept on speed dial. "Yes, Mr. Sterling," I said, keeping my voice perfectly calm and steady. "I need the town car sent to the residence immediately." A few minutes later, a sleek, jet-black luxury town car glided up to the curb, purring softly as it stopped right in front of the puddles holding my scattered clothes. A uniformed driver stepped out, holding a massive golf umbrella, shielding me from the downpour as he opened the leather-lined door. Chloe stood frozen in the doorway, her mouth slightly open, her arms falling to her sides in sheer confusion. She watched as I settled into the plush, heated leather seat without shedding a single tear, leaving my cheap vinyl suitcases right there in the mud. I did not look back as the car pulled away. Let her wonder. Let her panic. Because the truth was about to hit her harder than any storm ever could. My name is Yvonne. And if there is one thing life as a black woman in America has taught me, it is how to protect my peace. For 40 years, I worked in the public school system, climbing the ranks from a classroom teacher to a district administrator. I gave my heart to those children, and I gave my soul to my family. But the real foundation of my life, the quiet strength behind everything I did, was my late husband, Thomas. Thomas was a man of few words, but massive vision. When we first married, he drove a single delivery truck. We saved every penny, ate beans and rice, and worked ourselves to the bone. Over the decades, that single truck turned into a fleet, and that fleet turned into one of the most successful regional trucking and logistics companies in the state. Thomas built an empire while I ran the schools and raised our only son, Jamal. When my sweet Thomas passed away 5 years ago, after a brave battle with illness, he made sure I would never have to worry for a single second for the rest of my life. He liquidated the majority of his business assets and placed the vast wealth into an ironclad trust fund. He appointed our longtime attorney, Mr. Sterling, as the executor, ensuring that no one could ever touch a dime without my explicit authorization. Thomas knew the world. He knew what money does to people. He used to hold my hand and tell me, "Yvonne, visible wealth attracts fake love. Protect your heart and protect your purse." I took his words to heart. After he died, I did not go out and buy a mansion in a gated community. I did not drape myself in designer labels or buy a sports car. I kept my 10-year-old trusty sedan. I still clipped coupons for the grocery store, and I lived a quiet, simple life in a modest neighborhood. To the outside world, and more importantly to my daughter-in-law Chloe, I was just a retired school worker scraping by on a fixed government pension. They looked at my scuffed shoes and my plain handbags and assumed I was barely surviving. I let them believe it. I wanted to see who people truly were when they thought I had nothing to offer them financially. What I did not anticipate was how quickly the deception would reveal the rot inside my own family. I had poured all my love and resources into giving Jamal the life Thomas and I never had. We paid for his Ivy League education in cash, so he would graduate without a single student loan. We wanted him to be a successful corporate director, a man of integrity and honor. And for a long time, he was the sweet boy I raised. But then he met Chloe. Chloe was a white American woman who came from a family that valued appearances above all else. From the moment she entered Jamal's life, she brought a whirlwind of status obsession and entitlement. I watched my son trade his humble roots for luxury car leases, country club memberships, and a mortgage on a house they absolutely could not afford. They thought I was a burden, a broke old woman who needed their charity. They treated me with a condescending pity that I swallowed week after week just to stay close to my son. But sitting in the back of that luxury town car, watching the rain streak the tinted windows, I knew the masquerade was over. The disrespect had finally crossed a line that could not be uncrossed. Chloe thought she had won by throwing me out into the rain. She had no idea that the very house she was standing in, the very lifestyle she was desperately clinging to, was secretly being kept afloat by the broke mother-in-law she had just discarded. For decades, my late husband Thomas and I poured every ounce of our blood, sweat and tears into making sure our only son Jamal would never have to know the struggles we faced. Thomas started with nothing but a single used delivery truck and a work ethic that could move mountains. I spent my days walking the halls of the public school system, working my way up to district administrator, and my nights sitting at the kitchen table budgeting our finances down to the very last penny. We lived in a modest home, ate leftovers, and skipped vacations, all for one singular goal. We wanted to see our black son walk across an Ivy League stage and step into the world without the heavy chains of student debt dragging him down. When the acceptance letter from a prestigious university arrived, Thomas wept. That strong, proud man held that piece of paper like it was pure gold. We paid his tuition in cash every single semester. Jamal was a sweet boy back then. He used to call me every Sunday just to hear my voice. He would come home for the holidays, walk right into my kitchen, and hug me from behind while I stirred the collard greens. He appreciated our sacrifices. He knew the value of $1 and the depth of our love. After graduation, he climbed the corporate ladder with incredible speed, eventually becoming a corporate director at a major firm. Thomas and I could not have been prouder. But then he met Chloe. She was a white American woman from a family that cared more about zip codes and designer labels than character and integrity. From the moment she put a ring on my son, his entire demeanor shifted. The sweet boy who used to bring me grocery store bouquets turned into a man obsessed with status symbols and luxury brands. His calls became shorter and less frequent. He started adopting a fake, refined accent and acting embarrassed by the humble neighborhood where he grew up. Chloe molded him into her perfect high society accessory, and Jamal willingly let her do it. When my beloved Thomas passed away 5 years ago, my heart shattered into a million pieces. I needed my son more than ever, but Jamal barely shed a tear at the funeral. He was too busy managing the optics, making sure his wealthy colleagues saw him grieving in his tailored designer suit. He stopped being the boy Thomas and I raised and fully became a man I no longer recognized. He completely embraced a world built on shallow appearances, leaving me behind in the dust. What Jamal and Chloe did not know was that beneath my worn-out shoes and my 10-year-old sedan, I held the keys to the very lifestyle they were desperately trying to maintain. Before Thomas passed, he sat me down and explained exactly how much his business empire had grown. He was a brilliant man who understood that visible wealth attracts nothing but parasites. He liquidated his major assets and placed our vast fortune into an ironclad trust fund, with a shell company acting as the financial shield. When Jamal and Chloe got married, they insisted on buying a multi-million-dollar luxury condo in the most exclusive part of the city. They wanted to impress their friends and project an image of absolute perfection, but I knew exactly what Jamal earned, and I knew they could not afford that massive mortgage. A few months into their marriage, they began drowning in debt. To protect my son from complete financial ruin, I instructed my attorney, Mr. Sterling, to use our shell company to quietly purchase the management rights to their building. Every single month for 3 years, I anonymously covered the massive shortfall on their ridiculous mortgage. I paid thousands of dollars to keep a roof over their heads, and they never had the slightest clue. To them, I was just poor old Yvonne, surviving on a meager retired public school teacher pension. The disrespect I endured while secretly funding their luxurious lives was a bitter pill to swallow. Whenever I visited their pristine condo, they treated me like a charity case. Chloe would sigh loudly when I walked through the door, making sure to spray air freshener the second I sat on her expensive white sofa. She would look at my simple clothes with absolute disgust and offer me her old hand-me-down sweaters as if she were doing community service. Jamal would stand by and watch his wife humiliate me. Whenever it was time for me to leave, he would pull a $50 bill from his wallet and press it into my hand with a look of overwhelming pity. He would tell me to treat myself to a nice lunch, acting like a grand savior, providing for his impoverished mother. I would take that $50 bill, look at the marble floors and the floor-to-ceiling windows I was secretly paying for, and simply say thank you. I swallowed my pride because I foolishly believed that a mother must protect her child at all costs. I thought that keeping my wealth a secret would eventually allow Jamal to find his own way back to reality without the corrupting influence of unearned money. I let them treat me like a burden, completely unaware that without my silent generosity, their entire fake world would instantly collapse into foreclosure and ruin. The disrespect did not happen overnight. It started small, but quickly grew into a daily ritual of humiliation that chipped away at my spirit. Every time I visited their sprawling luxury condo, Chloe made it her personal mission to remind me that I did not belong in her pristine high society world. I would spend hours in my own kitchen, standing on my tired feet, carefully preparing the traditional soul food Jamal used to beg for when he was a little boy. I made candied yams, baked macaroni and cheese from scratch, and slow-cooked smothered pork chops. This was food made with generations of love recipes passed down from my own grandmother. But when I proudly brought those warm dishes into Chloe's immaculate dining room, her face would contort with absolute disgust. She would wave her manicured hand over the table, wafting the air as if my cooking was toxic. "We eat a clean, organic diet in this house, Yvonne," she would say, pinching her nose and rolling her eyes at her husband. "You cannot bring this greasy, heavy food in here. It completely ruins the aesthetic of my dining space, and it makes the whole penthouse smell like grease." Then, without an ounce of hesitation, she would take the meals I had spent all day cooking and scrape them right into the garbage disposal while I stood there and watched my labor of love get washed away. The cruelty did not stop at my cooking. Chloe took every opportunity to mock my physical appearance and my modest lifestyle. I wore sensible, modest clothes, practical cardigans, well-worn slacks, and comfortable shoes that supported my aging joints. I did not need to wrap myself in expensive labels to know my worth in this world, but Chloe would eye me up and down, letting out heavy theatrical sighs, as if my presence offended her very existence. She would aggressively spray expensive designer air freshener whenever I walked past her, loudly complaining to Jamal that she could not stand the smell of old age and mothballs lingering in her luxury condo. She even invited her wealthy socialite friends over while I was there, introducing me right to my face as a charming little charity project they had to tolerate for Jamal's sake. And my son, the boy I sacrificed my youth and my energy for, did absolutely nothing. I would look at Jamal, my heart breaking into pieces, desperately waiting for him to defend his mother. But Jamal would just stare at his expensive smartphone, or look down at the imported hardwood floor, suddenly fascinated by his shoes. Later, when I pulled him aside to express my hurt and ask for his support, he would sigh with deep, unmistakable irritation. "Mum, please, just be the bigger person," he would mutter, refusing to meet my eyes. Chloe is under a tremendous amount of stress, managing our social obligations and maintaining our network. Do not take it personally. You know how she gets. Just let it go and do not provoke her. He wanted me to shrink myself to erase my own dignity just to make his toxic wife comfortable. I swallowed the pain and endured the daily humiliation because I thought I was protecting my son. I foolishly thought my silent financial support would eventually help him find his way back to the boy he used to be. But the disrespect I suffered was merely the surface of a much darker, much more sinister reality that was brewing behind my back. The illusion of their perfect, successful life completely shattered on Thanksgiving Day. I had arrived early at their penthouse condo, quietly preparing the holiday meal in the expansive kitchen, while Jamal ran out to pick up wine. Chloe was in the formal dining room with her older brother Wyatt. Wyatt was a high-powered commercial real estate broker, a slick, white American man who wore custom-tailored suits that cost more than some people's cars. He had always looked right through me, treating me like the hired help, rather than family, refusing to even acknowledge my presence when he entered a room. As I arranged the silver flatware on a serving tray, the heavy mahogany doors separating the kitchen from the dining room were left slightly ajar. The apartment was dead silent, and their hushed, urgent voices carried directly into the kitchen. I never intended to eavesdrop, but the moment I heard my own name spoken with such venom, my feet rooted to the marble floor. "We cannot wait any longer." "Chloe." Wyatt hissed, his tone sharp, angry and frantic. "The creditors are breathing down my neck for the medical malpractice and fraud suit, and you and Jamal are 3 months behind on this ridiculous mortgage. The bank is going to foreclose by Christmas if we do not get a massive injection of cash immediately." I held my breath, feeling a cold, heavy knot form in the pit of my stomach. I knew they lived beyond their means, but I had no idea Wyatt was also facing total financial ruin and that they were all coordinating their survival together. "I am trying." "Wyatt." Chloe snapped back, pacing the floor. "But the old bat is impossibly stubborn. She insists on staying in that depressing little house of hers. Then we stop asking politely and we start taking forcefully." Wyatt replied coldly, the sound of papers slapping against a table echoing through the crack in the door. "I brought the documents you requested. I have a contact at a private medical facility who owes me a very large favor. He drafted a preliminary medical assessment stating that Yvonne is showing severe, irreversible signs of cognitive decline. We get Jamal to sign off as her primary caregiver, declare her legally incompetent in front of a judge, and force an involuntary transfer of her assets. We seize her house. I list it for a quick cash sale to one of my developer buddies, and we use the profits to clear all our debts before the year ends." The room started to spin. My hands gripped the edge of the cold granite kitchen counter so tightly my knuckles turned white. My own daughter-in-law was plotting to steal my home. The home where Thomas and I had raised Jamal. The home filled with every precious memory of my life. Every drop of sweat my late husband had poured into our future. What if she fights us? Chloe asked, her voice lacking even a single ounce of guilt or moral hesitation. What if she tries to get her own lawyer to block the transfer? She will not. Wyatt scoffed, laughing a cruel, deeply dismissive laugh that made my blood run cold. "Look at her, Chloe. She is a useless relic, a broke, retired public school worker who wears thrift store cardigans and drives a beat-up clunker. She does not have a dime to her name to fight a protracted legal battle. We throw her into a state-funded facility sell the house out from under her, and she will be too confused and financially powerless to stop us. Jamal is so terrified of losing his precious social status here that he will blindly go along with whatever you demand. I stood frozen in the kitchen, paralyzed by the sheer magnitude of their evil. They were not just ungrateful children. They were calculated predators. They viewed me as a disposable resource, a piece of meat to be carved up and sold to maintain their fake, luxurious facade. They thought I was a weak, penniless old woman who would quietly fade away into an institution without putting up a fight. They had absolutely no idea that the woman they were plotting to destroy was the only reason they still had a roof over their heads. The final crushing blow came exactly a week later. Jamal had invited me over for what he nervously described as an urgently important family meeting. When I arrived, the atmosphere inside the condo was thick and suffocating with tension. Wyatt was already sitting on the expensive white sofa, a sleek leather briefcase resting casually on his knees. Chloe stood beside him, holding a glossy brochure tightly in her hands. Jamal stood far away by the window, his arms crossed defensively, absolutely refusing to make eye contact with me. "Yvonne, take a seat," Chloe commanded, not even offering a basic greeting. Her tone was sharp and devoid of warmth. "Wyatt and I have been doing a lot of thinking about your future. We are concerned about your rapid mental decline. You have been acting forgetful, and frankly, you are becoming a massive liability to yourself." She shoved the glossy brochure into my trembling hands. It was a pamphlet for a grim state-funded nursing facility on the outskirts of the city. "We found a permanent bed for you here," she continued. "It is secure, and they are equipped to manage people in your deteriorating condition." Wyatt smoothly pulled a thick stack of legal documents from his briefcase and laid them deliberately on the coffee table. He clicked a gold pen and held it out toward me. "We just need you to sign this medical power of attorney," Mrs. Yvonne Wyatt said with a sickeningly sweet smile. "It gives Jamal and Chloe the complete legal right to manage your health decisions and your estate. We will handle the immediate sale of your house so you do not have to stress your fragile mind with the complicated financial details." I looked at the gold pen. I looked at the humiliating brochure. And then I looked at my only son. "Jamal," I said, my voice dangerously calm but vibrating with heartbreak. "Are you truly going to stand there and let them do this to your mother? Are you going to let these vultures steal the home your father worked his entire life to pay for?" Jamal shifted uncomfortably, staring intently out the window, too cowardly to face me. "Mom, it is for the best," he muttered weakly. "You're getting older. We need to be practical about the situation." The betrayal was absolute, final, and devastating. My heart turned to pure ice right inside my chest. I slowly placed the nursing home brochure down on the glass table and firmly pushed the gold pen away. "I am not signing anything," I said, standing up to my full height with unwavering authority. "I am not going to any facility, and neither of you will ever lay a single finger on my home." Chloe's face turned bright red. Her carefully crafted mask of polite concern instantly dissolved into pure, unfiltered, ugly rage. "You stubborn, ignorant old woman," she shrieked, stepping right into my face. "You are a penniless burden. You bring absolutely nothing to this family but embarrassment. I am sick of looking at your cheap clothes and dealing with your pathetic life. You are going to sign those legal papers right now, or I will throw you out into the street." When I remained perfectly silent, refusing to flinch, she grabbed my arm violently and shoved me toward the hallway. Wyatt quickly stepped in, snatching my wool coat and my handbag from the closet, tossing them carelessly onto the floor. Jamal turned his back, completely looking the other way, as his wife physically pushed his mother toward the exit. "Get out of my house!" Chloe screamed, kicking my belongings out the front door and onto the wet pavement of the driveway. "I am not caring for a broke mother-in-law. You are dead to us." I stepped out into the freezing rain. The heavy wooden door slammed shut behind me with a violent thud. I stood there on the wet concrete, soaked and discarded by the very people I had sacrificed my life to protect. But as the icy rain washed over my face, the sadness completely evaporated, leaving behind a fierce, unshakable determination. They thought they had successfully discarded a helpless, impoverished victim. They had no idea they had just unleashed a storm they could never survive. The luxury town car glided through the stormy streets, taking me far away from the neighborhood where I had just been thrown out like trash. I did not shed a single tear. The initial shock had washed away completely, replaced by a freezing clarity that sharpened my every thought. The driver pulled up to the grand entrance of the most exclusive five-star hotel in the city centre. A doorman rushed out with an umbrella, ushering me into a lobby dripping with crystal chandeliers and polished marble. I walked straight to the concierge desk and booked their top-floor penthouse suite, paying up front for a month with the exclusive black card I kept hidden for emergencies. As I rode the private elevator up to the top floor, I looked at my reflection in the mirrored doors. I saw a 65-year-old black woman who had survived decades of hard work. I saw a mother who had given everything to her son. But most importantly, I saw a woman who was done being disrespected. The penthouse was breathtaking, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the glittering skyline, a massive soaking tub, and plush velvet furnishings. But I did not care about the luxury. I cared about the silence. I needed absolute quiet to execute what came next. I sat at the heavy mahogany dining table in the suite, took a deep breath, and called Mr. Sterling. My late husband, Thomas, had trusted this man with his life and his legacy. Mr. Sterling was a legal bulldog, a man who moved silently but struck with devastating precision. When he answered, I did not sound like a grieving mother. I sounded like the owner of a massive trust fund who had just declared war. "Mr. Sterling," I said, my voice steady and cold. "The situation with my son and his wife has reached a point of no return. They physically threw me out of their home tonight. They are conspiring to forge medical documents to declare me incompetent. They plan to seize my family home and sell it from under me." There was a brief silence on the other end of the line. When Mr. Sterling spoke, his voice was pure steel. "I am so terribly sorry, Yvonne. Give me the word and I will destroy them legally and financially by morning." I leaned back in the velvet chair, looking out at the city lights. "Do not strike yet," I instructed. "I want you to pull every single financial record you can find on my daughter-in-law Chloe, her brother Wyatt, and my son Jamal. I want to see their bank statements, their credit card debt, their hidden loans, and every dirty little secret they have been burying. I want to know exactly how deep their ruin goes before I pull the rug out from under them. I also want you to place an immediate lock on my personal medical records and send a cease and desist to any physician Wyatt might have bribed." Mr. Sterling assured me it would be done within 24 hours. I hung up the phone and walked over to the expansive windows. I looked down at the tiny cars navigating the wet streets below. Chloe thought I was a helpless old woman crying in the rain. She thought she had all the power. She was about to learn that true power does not need to scream in a driveway. True power works in the shadows, gathers its forces, and waits for the perfect moment to strike. I was no longer playing the role of the humble public school administrator. I was Thomas's widow, and I was about to protect my empire. The very next morning, Mr. Sterling arrived at my penthouse suite, carrying a thick leather briefcase. He ordered coffee from room service and spread a mountain of documents across the dining table. The arrogant facade Chloe and Jamal presented to the world was nothing but a fragile house of cards, waiting for a single gust of wind to knock it all down. "Let us start with the brother Wyatt," Mr. Sterling said, handing me a thick file. "He is currently facing a massive malpractice lawsuit for a fraudulent commercial real estate deal. The state is actively moving to strip him of his broker license. He owes hundreds of thousands in legal fees, and he is desperate for a quick cash injection to settle out of court before he faces prison time. I slowly nodded, scanning the paperwork. That explained his frantic urgency to steal my modest family home. Wyatt needed my house to save his own skin. But the real devastation lay in the next folder Mr. Sterling handed me. This was the financial profile of my son, Jamal, and his wife, Chloe. My heart sank as I read the numbers. Their multi-million-dollar luxury condo was 3 months behind on the mortgage. Their premium credit cards were entirely maxed out. They had taken out high-interest personal loans just to maintain their country club memberships and lease their expensive foreign cars. They were drowning in a sea of debt, completely paralyzed by their obsession with high society status. For 3 years, I had used the shell company Thomas set up to quietly subsidize their lifestyle. Every month, I anonymously paid the massive shortfall on their mortgage to keep them from facing foreclosure. I did it because I loved my son, and I wanted to protect him from ruin. But protecting him had only enabled his toxic marriage and fueled his immense disrespect toward me. He allowed his wife to throw me into the freezing rain, while I was the only reason they had a roof over their heads. I looked at the mortgage statements showing my anonymous payments. The pain of my son's betrayal twisted sharply in my chest. A mother's instinct is always to nurture and shield her child from harm. But Thomas had warned me that unearned wealth creates monsters. Jamal had become a monster. It was time to introduce him to the real world. Mr. Sterling, I said, my voice devoid of any emotion. Sever the financial life support immediately, cancel the anonymous monthly transfers to the property management company, liquidate the safety net. Mr. Sterling nodded, jotting down the instructions. The bank will initiate default proceedings within the week, he informed me. Since they are already 3 months in arrears, the management company will move quickly to foreclose. I felt a single tear escape my eye, but I quickly wiped it away. I was cutting the financial strings, tying me to my son. I was letting his fake world collapse. It was the hardest decision a mother could make, but it was the only way to deliver the justice they so arrogantly thought they could escape. They wanted to cast me aside because they thought I had no value. Now they would experience exactly what their lives looked like, without my hidden value holding them up. I authorized the cancellation of the payments with a firm signature. The trap was set, and the countdown to their total financial destruction had officially begun. 2 days later, Mr. Sterling called me with an update that made my blood boil all over again. Yvonne. He said, his tone urgent. My investigators just flagged a new real estate listing. Wyatt has officially listed your family home for an illegal pre-sale. He forged your signature on a fraudulent power of attorney document and is quietly shopping the property to private developers looking for a fast cash deal. The audacity of this white American broker trying to sell the home where my husband and I shared our deepest joys filled me with a righteous, blazing anger. They were not waiting for me to be committed to a facility. They were actively stealing my property in broad daylight. But their desperation was about to be their ultimate downfall. Mr. Sterling also informed me that Jamal and Chloe were in a complete state of panic. Without my anonymous payments, their property management company had issued a final notice of default. In a desperate bid to save themselves, they were urgently trying to sell their luxury condo or secure a private refinancing deal through Wyatt's real estate agency. They needed a miracle investor to bail them out before the bank seized their home and their social standing was destroyed. I smiled, looking at the diamond wedding band on my finger. Thomas always said that greedy people are the easiest targets because their desperation blinds them to the truth. I knew exactly how to spring the trap. Mr. Sterling, I want you to make a phone call to Wyatt's agency, I instructed. Tell him you represent an anonymous wealthy buyer who is highly interested in purchasing Jamal and Chloe's luxury condo in cash. Tell him your client is willing to pay above market value to close the deal immediately. Offer to bundle the transaction and handle their financial liabilities Wyatt is so desperate for a commission and a bailout that he will not ask any questions. He will jump at the bait. Mr. Sterling chuckled, deeply appreciating the brilliance of the maneuver. And where would you like this closing meeting to take place, Yvonne? Set the meeting for tomorrow afternoon at Wyatt's upscale real estate office, I replied, smoothing the fabric of my brand new tailored suit. Tell them the anonymous investor requires all parties to be present for the signing. Make sure Jamal, Chloe, and Wyatt are all sitting in that boardroom thinking they have just won the lottery. I want them celebrating their supposed salvation right up until the moment I walk through the doors. Mr. Sterling executed the plan flawlessly. Within hours, Wyatt had gleefully accepted the meeting, completely blinded by the promise of a massive cash bailout. He called Jamal and Chloe, assuring them that a mysterious millionaire was about to save their condo and clear their debts. My private investigator reported that Chloe was already bragging to her socialite friends about their new real estate triumph. They thought they had outsmarted the world. They thought they had successfully thrown away a broke mother-in-law and secured their wealthy future. They were eagerly polishing their glasses to toast to their success, completely unaware that the anonymous millionaire buying their debt was the very woman they had discarded in the rain. I spent the evening preparing my wardrobe and organizing the trust fund documents. The storm had passed, and the skies over the city were finally clear. Tomorrow I would walk into that office not as a grieving mother or a helpless widow, but as the undisputed owner of the empire they tried to steal. I was ready to serve them a heavy dose of reality. The rain from the previous week had given way to a bright, glaring afternoon sun, as my private town car pulled up to the sleek, glass-fronted building in the downtown financial district. Wyatt operated out of a high-end real estate agency on the top floor, a place designed with Italian marble floors and modern art to intimidate anyone who walked through the doors. I stepped out of the vehicle. I was not wearing my sensible orthopedic shoes or the faded beige cardigan Chloe loved to mock. Instead, I wore a tailored charcoal grey designer knit suit that fit me perfectly. Around my neck and on my wrists rested Thomas's most exquisite gifts, custom-designed diamond jewelry that caught the light with every step I took. I looked exactly like the multi-million-dollar investor they were so desperately waiting to meet. Mr. Sterling met me in the lobby, his leather briefcase in hand, looking like a shark smelling blood in the water. We rode the private elevator up to Wyatt's agency in absolute silence. When the polished steel doors parted, I could see straight into the glass-walled conference room at the end of the hall. Wyatt, Chloe, and Jamal were already seated around a massive mahogany table. They were sipping sparkling water from crystal glasses, grinning and laughing as if they had not a single care in the world. Wyatt, a slick white American broker, was adjusting his expensive silk tie, leaning back in his leather chair, with the arrogant posture of a man who thought he had just pulled off the scam of the century. Chloe was practically bouncing in her seat, scrolling through her phone, undoubtedly looking at luxury vacations she planned to book the moment this mysterious investor bailed them out. And my son, Jamal, the boy I had sacrificed everything for, sat there nodding along with them, completely complicit in the plan to steal my home and lock me away in a state facility. Mr. Sterling opened the heavy glass door to the conference room, and I walked in right behind him. The laughter died instantly. The smug, victorious smiles melted off their faces so fast it was almost comical. Wyatt frowned, leaning forward and placing his hands flat on the mahogany table. "What is the meaning of this?" Wyatt demanded, his voice sharp and irritated. "Yvonne, you cannot be here. We are about to close a multi-million-dollar private transaction with a major investor. You need to leave right now before you ruin this for us." Chloe slammed her phone down on the table, her face twisting into that familiar mask of ugly rage. "I told you we were done with you," she spat, standing up and pointing a manicured finger at the door. "You are a penniless burden. You have no business being in a place like this. Jamal, get your mother out of here right now. The buyer could walk in at any second, and I am not letting her cheap smell ruin our deal." Jamal finally looked at me, but his eyes darted nervously to the diamonds around my neck and the impeccable cut of my suit. He looked confused, blinking rapidly as his brain struggled to process the image of the broke mother he had discarded standing before him draped in undeniable wealth. "Mum," he stammered, his voice weak and trembling. "What are you wearing? How did you get in here? How?" I did not raise my voice. I did not shed a tear. I simply pulled out a leather chair at the head of the mahogany table and sat down, folding my hands in my lap. "I am exactly where I am supposed to be," I said, my voice ringing with cold, absolute authority. Mr. Sterling stepped forward and unclasped his briefcase. "Allow me to clarify the situation for all of you," he said, his deep voice commanding the entire room. "I am Arthur Sterling, executor of the Thomas Family Trust. You are currently waiting for an anonymous wealthy investor who offered a cash bailout for your severely delinquent luxury condo. You are also hoping this same investor will overlook your massive credit liabilities?" Wyatt nodded slowly, a look of profound confusion washing over his face. "Yes, that is my client." "Where are they?" Mr. Sterling gestured toward me. "You are looking at her. Yvonne is the sole beneficiary and absolute controller of the Thomas Trust, an entity worth tens of millions of dollars. Furthermore, the anonymous management company that holds the secondary mortgage on your luxury condo, the same company that has been miraculously covering your severe financial shortfalls for the past 3 years, is completely owned and operated by Yvonne's trust." The silence that fell over the glass conference room was absolutely deafening. You could have heard a pin drop on the thick carpet. Wyatt collapsed back into his leather chair, the colour completely draining from his face as his arrogant posture crumbled. Chloe gasped, her hands flying up to cover her mouth as she stared at me with wide, terrified eyes. I reached into Mr. Sterling's open briefcase, pulled out a thick stack of legal documents, and dropped them heavily onto the centre of the polished mahogany table. The loud thud made Jamal physically jump in his seat. "Those are your official foreclosure notices," I told them, staring directly into Chloe's panicked eyes. "I have legally severed all the invisible financial life support I was providing for your precious penthouse. The bank has already initiated the seizure of the property due to your severe non-payment. I am pulling my financial backing entirely. You will be locked out of that condo by the end of the week." "No!" Chloe shrieked, her voice cracking as genuine tears of terror began to stream down her face. "No, you cannot do this to us. We will lose everything. Our friends, our reputation. We will be homeless. You are supposed to be family." "You made it very clear that I was not family," I replied coldly. "You said I was a broke burden. You threw my clothes into the freezing rain. I am simply giving you exactly what you asked for. A life completely free of my presence and free of my money." Mr. Sterling then pulled a separate red folder from his briefcase and slid it directly across the table to Wyatt. Wyatt stared at it as if it were a venomous snake. "Mr. Wyatt," Mr. Sterling said, his tone razor-sharp, "I have already contacted the State Real Estate Commission and the local authorities regarding the fraudulent power of attorney document you drafted. Attempting to list and sell a property you have no legal right to, while actively conspiring to falsely imprison the rightful owner in a medical facility, is a severe federal crime. Your broker license is suspended, and the police will be waiting for you at your home later this evening." Wyatt began to hyperventilate, clutching his chest as he realized his entire career and freedoms were completely destroyed. But the most satisfying reaction came from my son. Jamal reached out with trembling hands and pulled the trust fund summary sheet from the stack of papers I had dropped. His eyes scanned the multi-million-dollar balance printed in bold black ink at the bottom of the page. He looked at the vast wealth his father had built the empire he could have been a part of if he had only possessed an ounce of loyalty and respect. "Mom," Jamal whispered, dropping the paper as tears welled up in his eyes. "Mom, I had no idea. Please, I am so sorry. Chloe made me do it. She poisoned my mind." I love you. We can fix this. You cannot just leave me with nothing. I looked at the boy I had sacrificed my entire youth to raise. I saw the desperate, greedy panic in his eyes, and I felt absolutely nothing. You made your choice, Jamal, I said, my voice steady and resolute. You stood by the window and looked the other way, while your wife threw me into the mud. You were perfectly willing to let me rot in a state facility so you could pay off your credit cards. You do not love me. You love the numbers on that piece of paper, and you will never touch a single dime of it. I stood up, adjusting the lapels of my designer suit. Wyatt was sobbing quietly into his hands, completely broken by the reality of his impending arrest. Chloe was wailing, begging Jamal to do something to somehow fix the catastrophic mess they had created. But Jamal just sat there, frozen in sheer horror, staring blankly at the millions of dollars he had permanently lost for the sake of a toxic, greedy woman. I turned my back on them and walked toward the heavy glass doors. Jamal called out my name one last time, his voice cracking with desperation. But I did not stop, and I did not look back. Mr. Sterling followed closely behind me, leaving the three of them trapped in the conference room with the devastating consequences of their own actions. When I stepped out of the building and into the warm afternoon sun, my driver was waiting by the open door of the luxury town car. I slid into the comfortable leather seat and let out a long, peaceful breath. I realized then that I did not need to buy my son's love, and I did not need to hide my success to find peace. The invisible chains of obligation were finally broken. I was free, and my golden years were truly mine to enjoy. It has been several months since that afternoon in Wyatt's office, and my life has transformed in ways I never thought possible. I still live in the city, but I bought a beautiful modern townhouse with a garden that Thomas would have absolutely loved. The silence in my new home is not lonely. It is the sound of true peace. It is the sound of a woman who finally recognizes her own value. Jamal and Chloe lost their luxury condo, just as the bank promised. I heard through the grapevine that they are currently renting a tiny, cramped apartment on the very outskirts of town and struggling to make ends meet. Wyatt is facing serious prison time for his fraudulent schemes, and his real estate career is completely destroyed. Sometimes, late at night, I look at the stars and think about the son I raised. I miss the sweet boy he used to be, but I refuse to mourn the man he willingly chose to become. I had to learn the absolute hardest lesson a mother can ever learn. You cannot save people who view your love as a weakness and your generosity as an endless bank account. So I am sitting here today sharing my journey with all of you, because I know there is someone out there who truly needs to hear this. Ladies, we spend our whole lives pouring our blood and sweat into our families. We build homes, we raise children, we wipe tears, and we sacrifice our own dreams just to make sure they can reach theirs. But never let your love blind you to disrespect. If they only love what you can do for them, they do not love you at all. Do not let anyone ever make you feel like you are a burden or a useless relic simply because you have aged or because you choose to live humbly. Your sacrifices gave them the ground they stand on. You hold the power and you dictate your own worth. Do not wait for a wake-up call in the freezing rain to realize your own strength and value. If my story resonated with you, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Drop a comment below, telling me where you are watching from and what time it is there. I read every single one. Remember your worth, queens. Until next time, ladies.